Let's move on, Sean, though, into 11 through 20. If you did not catch, if you're on YouTube, didn't catch our 21 through 30, after you listen to this, go check out 21. I almost said 11 through 30. 21 through 30. It's basically what you're going to do with both videos, but let's get into...
I was going to yell at them to watch it, but I'm not going to do it.
Let's look at who our 11 through 20 is. Starting at number 20, Denver Bronco wide receiver. Kind of mentioned him in the last segment, Demaryius Thomas. Then number 19, Amari Cooper of the Oakland Raiders. Number 18, Jarvis Landry, the newest addition to the Cleveland Browns. 17, another new addition, this time to the Chicago Bears, Allen Robinson. Number 16 used to play for the Bears. Now he plays for the defending Super Bowl champion Eagles in Alshon Jeffrey. Then number 15, wide receiver for my Minnesota Vikings, Stephon Diggs. Number 14, Doug Baldwin of the Seattle Seahawks. 13, Tyreek Hill of the Kansas City Chiefs. Number 12, Brandon Cooks of now the Los Angeles Rams. And then at number 11, Adam Thielen of the Minnesota Vikings.
Hooked on
right there at number 11. And the first guy I want to mention is Amari Cooper, because just to look up really quick, you had him in the top 20.
Yep.
Mark had him in the top 20. Actually, both of you guys had him in the top 15. I had him at 24. And the reason why I have him at 24 is, first off, John Gruden's system. I don't know what to expect.
That's fair.
With the John Gruden offense. I knew what to expect last year, especially with Michael Crabtree there also. But Amari Cooper and Derek Carr are going to have a new system. Plus, you add on to it, I'm not really worried about Martavius Bryant, but you have Martavius Bryant and, more importantly, Jordy Nelson.
Yeah.
I kind of have a feeling, and I was thinking about this today. Some say, like, oh, you know what? Don't worry. Cooper's going to be the guy. He knows the system. Well, the system's going to be new to everyone. Does Jordy Nelson hurt Amari Cooper's fantasy stock? That's what I'm thinking.
I think Martavius Bryant and Jordy Nelson helps Amari Cooper, weirdly enough. We saw what Amari Cooper wasn't able to do without a guy like Michael Crabtree and Derek Carr. Without those three, he had a horrible year last year. He didn't look like Amari Cooper. He had some flashes. That I think that Denver game or Kansas City game absolutely balled out, but he wasn't Amari Cooper last year with those guys around him. Having Jordy Nelson, having Martavius Bryant is just going to help him, because it's going to be able to at least take the pressure off him, and he's going to be at least he's going to be less focused on, because you're going to have to focus on Jordy Nelson. This is a guy that's put up 1,000 yards receiving before. Martavius Bryant is a massive body. He's got great speed. He's going to be someone that's going to be dangerous, and you're going to need to put your focus on him. When they spread out, it's going to be Cooper one-on-one with another corner, and I think that Cooper is going to be able to at least take advantage of most teams and most other teams number one. So I think that's going to be something that's going to be interesting. And I think the biggest thing for me is you mentioned the Gruden system, and it's just, what is it going to be like after 10 years? How is Gruden going to change that coming in or back to the NFL after that 10-year hiatus? Is he going to be as heavily throwing the ball as the Raiders used to throw it under Jack Del Rio? Will it still be the same offense that they used to run? Or will it, or at least how similar will it be, and how similar will it be to the modern day NFL? Will Gruden still be stuck in the days of 2008? I think that's the biggest thing with Amari Cooper, and if Derek Carr is healthy. If Derek Carr is healthy and they're still throwing the ball the same amount, Amari Cooper is still Amari Cooper. This guy's going to get 1,000 yards receiving, and you don't have Crabtree taking away those red zone receptions from him. And I think Jordy Nelson, while he's a great receiver, I don't think he's really going to be a guy that's going to be eating up red zone targets unless it's something where it's a design play for him. And same with Martavius Bryant. I think Amari Cooper is now the guy. I think this is actually a helpful addition that he got Bryant and got Nelson, because it's just going to take less pressure off him, and he's going to get more high pressured and high at least situation targets and receptions.
Well, and here's the thing I'm looking at is the only thing that we have as an inkling of what John Gruden is going to do is looking at his OC. And he's bringing in Greg Olsen, who was the quarterback's coach with the Rams last year. To me, I look at that then and I go, is this going to be a spread out evenly thing? Because and I know these are averages on ESPN for PPR leagues, but Cooper Kupp last year had just over almost 177 points for the season. You had Robert Woods, who had 163, and then with Sammy Watkins, I actually have to look at KC for that because they have the updated roster. Sammy Watkins was at 146. So, is that going to be the kind of mold, per se, that we could see with Nelson, Cooper, and Bryant, where it's like none of these guys are really. Yeah, there's one that's almost at a 177 for the year, but none of them really jump out like a Brandon Cooks who had like over 200 fantasy points last year in PPR.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean it's and one thing, just going back to the whole Gruden thing. I mean, even though he does have Greg Olson or Greg Davis, what's
Greg Olson?
Greg Olson. I don't feel like I'm used to him being a tight end. I know he's a completely different person.
Spelled completely different, too.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, Greg Olson, again, Gruden's still going to be calling the plays. So it's still a Gruden offense. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. It's a fair point to bring up with Cooper, especially in a PPR league. But, again, if he's getting around, 8 receptions a game, if he's getting around 80 receptions on a year, he's gonna at least be getting at least 4 to 5 points, 6 points, 4 to 6 catches a game, which is gonna at least give you at least 3 points, possibly 6 points if you're in a 1-point PPR league. And I still think we've only seen him have 7 touchdowns at most in a season. I think this year might be the year he breaks double digits because again you're taking away Crabtree and he's gonna be more of seen as the guy, and he's finally getting his quarterback back in Derek Carr. We've seen the connection that they've had before, the spark that they've had before, and last year he did have his best year without Carr, getting 7 touchdowns, and it wasn't even the same Amari Cooper. I'm just really interested to see what Amari Cooper will look like with Derek Carr and with his guy back.
Who's the guy you want to talk about? First guy you want to mention.
I want to mention 2 guys, and they still have a similar link, and it's a current Chicago Bear and it's a former Chicago Bear.
Okay.
It's Allen Robinson, and it's Alshon Jeffrey. Look at Robinson coming off of his injury and working with Mitch. We have high expectations for this Nagy offense. We have high expectations for the Chicago Bears. They might get 7 wins this year. But
I see some picking 8 to 9 already.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's fair. We have a good defense already, and having Jordan Howard, having a second-year Mitch Trubisky, having a great offensive play caller and a great offensive mind in Nagy, it's gonna be interesting.
I think my favorite prediction so far from the outcast, if you're a Bears fan, go see their early preview and predictions. The one comment was like 6-10. Let's hope maybe we can win one divisional game this year. Like that was just my favorite one. But I mean, Allen Robinson, I'm not even a Bears fan, and I'm excited for what he can do. Like, I had him 13 on my wide receiver rankings.
And it's way too high.
It's a little high.
It's way too high.
It's a little high.
Like, that's the thing is, we
Mitch Trubisky.
We have to see how he comes back. And yes, he was a highly targeted player in Jacksonville, 2015, 2016, 151 targets. He was a guy that had 14 touchdowns back in 2015. But we also saw Mitch's downfall. How much has Mitch progressed? And also, how healthy is Allen Robinson? If Allen Robinson is perfectly healthy and Mitch Trubisky is, got to play like Jared Goff, he's a top 10 wide receiver. I mean, it's pure and simple. But also, that's not clear. Is Mitch going to be able to adapt to this offense, this Matt Nagy offense, like Jared Goff was able to adapt to that Sean McVay offense? Will he be able to take those steps? We saw great flashes from Mitch. Mitch looked at times like a great leader and a great quarterback, but also he had some terrible games where he couldn't throw the ball left and right, hit his receivers. So if that's still a problem, that's going to be something that holds Allen Robinson's production back. And if he's not healthy, we talked about this with Julian Edelman, if he's not healthy, then, I mean, he's screwed. I mean, he's not going to be able to be the same wide receiver that had 1,400 yards back in 2015. That was, again, 3 years removed.
One thing I just want to say, because I never thought about that connection, the whole Goff to Mitch Trubisky connection. Yeah. Be careful. There might be Bears fans then that see that and go, oh, my God, we can make the playoffs this year. Because that's what happened with the Rams.
You could. I mean, look at the similarities between the Rams and the Bears. Great.
Division's a little tougher for the Bears.
A little bit, but again, we look at what the Rams had before. Yes, they had Wade Phillips come in, but also they had great players on that defensive side. Their defense was always good. They had Robert
very
Quinn.
Young defensively.
They had Aaron Donald. They're young defensively, but they're also good defensively. Yeah. They were one of the best defenses last year. It's just going to get better because hopefully Leonard Floyd's healthy. Hopefully the additions they've made through the draft and through the free agency period, and also Fangio just being there another year, instilling these players, is going to propel that to possibly near a top 5 defense, and having that offense to boast and at least not be able to have your defense out on the field so much. It's going to make that defense better. And again, we expect a ton from this offense. You see the wide receiving core come along. You think Mitch is going to progress as far as as much as he's able to, and at least be a comparable quarterback this year and be possibly a top 20 fantasy to top 15 fantasy quarterback this year, and you still have the great Jordan Howard. So this is a team that has a lot of interesting pieces, and Matt Nagy, if he's able to spark some culture into this team, they're able to buy into this system, and which it seems so far they have. This team could be dangerous, and if they're able to, win a couple early ones from Minnesota, the first game against Green Bay, 2 from Detroit, this team could be making the playoffs. Well, I mean, it's possible. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's possible.
And I mean, when it comes to Allen Robinson, kind of to bring it back into the wide receivers, he's the one I'm most excited for. The second one I'm most excited for is Anthony Miller, who I mentioned in our first part of these rankings. But I mean, I am intrigued to see. Maybe I'm a little too high on Robinson coming in, but I am interested to see what these guys do in the Matt Nagy offense. We saw what it can do in KC with an Alex Smith quarterback, and then last game of the year with a Patrick Mahomes. I want to see, although I'm a Vikings fan, I want to see what this offense can do with Mitch Trubisky and what Mitch Trubisky can do with an offensive mind behind him and how that's going to benefit the wide receivers. The other guy you mentioned that to me it's kind of like, all right, like there's nothing really new happening here is Alshon Jeffrey. Like he's going to get his quarterback back and Carson Wentz.
That's the thing. He's getting his quarterback back, and when he didn't have his quarterback, he did have 10 targets in that first game against New York. He only had 4 catches for 49 yards and a touchdown.
And he doesn't have Torrey Smith anymore.
Yeah, either. And then in the game against Oakland, 2 targets, no receptions. Then the game against Philly or against Dallas in the last game, 2 targets, 1 reception. He was not the same wide receiver when Foles was out there, at least at the end of the regular season. I know the postseason was different, but again, we're talking about fantasy football.
Yeah,
in the regular season.
He had a few catches against my Vikings.
And that was the thing. The first 13 games when he did have Carson Wentz, 106 targets, 732 yards receiving. He was going to pretty much close in on another 1,000 yards receiving this season. He also had 8 touchdowns, so you probably could have added on, probably a 10 touchdown year for Alshon Jeffrey, and he's going to be molding with a better Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is going to get better, and we're not sure when Carson will come back this year. It's going to be interesting.
He's confident that he'll be back week 1. That's what he says.
That's what he says. Obviously, doctors are different.
Saying,
I think Andrew Luck was confident he was going to be able to come back last year. Again, it's going to be interesting. You also don't want to rush Carson Wentz. That's another big thing. He's a competitor, so he's going to want to come back as soon as possible. But also, we saw Foles gel more with this team. So I think Alshon might be a little bit slow, possibly, to start the first 2 weeks. But when he does have Carson Wentz back, Carson loved throwing to him. Carson loved him in the red zone, and we know what Alshon can do, especially being a Bears fan. When he's healthy and he's motivated, like he was last year, he can be a dominant player on the outside.
Yeah, and I mean with the Eagles, I really think that like with Alshon, it's one of those where it's like I just put him on there, and I'm like, you know what? He's one of those ones to me where it's like, is he gonna be good? Yeah. Is he going to be great? Nah, maybe not amazing, maybe not top 10, but he's a solid top 20 wide receiver when it comes to fantasy.
And that's the thing. This is the last year was his most targets since 2014. Had 120 last year. Pretty much was going to close back on where he was in 2013, 2014. Was going to near around 145 targets. Was going to break 1,000 yards most likely. And he had 9 touchdowns to finish the season. His most in his career is 10. If he's able to get you, 1,000 yards receiving, 10 touchdowns, and if you're in a PPR league, get you maybe 60 receptions. I think it's a really damn good year for Alshon Jeffrey, and we don't know how the Torrey Smith, departure will affect Alshon Jeffrey, at least touchdown-wise. It might put him up to possibly 11, 12, 13. This could be a Philly offense that might even have one of the best years we've ever seen from an offense. Carson Wentz, the way he was playing, he was the MVP last year. So if he's able to grow even more coming back from this injury, Alshon Jeffrey could have a great year.
Well, and the next one I kind of want to move into are the 2 that you had highlighted from the team I cheer for, the Minnesota Vikings. And it's interesting because if you looked at the individual rankings, I had Thielen higher than Diggs. Mark had Thielen higher than Diggs. You had Diggs higher than Thielen.
Yep.
And the thing that comes into this for me is, first off, look at last year for the Vikings. Obviously, something with Case Keenum and Adam Thielen throughout the year, they had a connection. And obviously, you have that one. How many targets did Thielen have? It was over 100. He had 143, according to ESPN. 95.
Pro Football Reference says 143.
Over 140.
Yeah.
Whereas Diggs he was like 5 short of 100 on the year. Not a huge disparity, but quite a bit of a disparity between targets. You got Kirk Cousins coming in. Kirk Cousins targeted Jamison Crowder 104 times, Vernon Davis 69, and then the next wide receiver had 78 was Josh Doxson.
Yep.
So, I mean, yes, now Kirk Cousins has two beautiful weapons to play with, along with Kyle Rudolph, who should see a bump also with how much Kirk Cousins liked the defense or liked the tight end in Washington. Why did you put Diggs though high above Thielen? Was it because of Cousins coming in?
Well, one, I think Diggs is a better player. I think even though Adam Thielen had a better year last year, I think Stefon Diggs is a better player. And we saw what Stefon Diggs can do when healthy. Stefon Diggs was nagged with injuries last year. He was consistently dealing with turf toe. He wasn't healthy out there. Even though he might have played a couple games injured, he only played 14 games last year. If he's healthy, he's a more explosive player than Adam Thielen is. And he also had more touchdowns than Adam Thielen did last year. And this is something where, again, Diggs is a big play guy. He's a guy that can catch balls, 25, 30 yards out. He's a weapon that, Kirk Cousins hasn't had since Deshaun Jackson. And when he was working with Deshaun Jackson, he threw 11 touchdowns to Deshaun Jackson. He's thrown touchdowns to 22 receivers. Deshaun Jackson is fourth all time, and he hasn't played with Deshaun Jackson since 2016. So, I mean, it's been a while since he's been able to work it. He's been working with Crowder. He's been working with Jordan Reed since then, and Deshaun Jackson is still up there for most touchdowns given to him. I think he might have a similar Deshaun Jackson role. I think he's possibly could be better than Deshaun Jackson when he was with Washington. So I think this is something where Stefon Diggs is a better player. He's more athletic, and he's a pretty strong kid for the size that he does have. I think Stefon Diggs could be a big play guy that Kirk Cousins might play with more.
Let me ask you this, because I'm not going to answer this question because I might be a little biased in my answer. So I'll ask you: do you think there's a shot, and if so, what's your percentage that maybe between Thielen and Diggs, now with Kirk Cousins, they both crack 1,000 yards this year?
I think it's fairly decent. I mean, again, you look at last year, and we all feel that, again, talent-wise, Kirk Cousins is better than
Case Keenum.
Case Keenum might have been a better fit. Still yet to be seen. We haven't seen a game played yet. But, again, this is a better quarterback, quote unquote. I mean, this is the reason why he got guaranteed money. He got the largest quarterback contract in NFL history for what he's done so far. And some people even argue whether he's great and was worth that contract. But I mean, these are two guys in Stefon Diggs, 849 yards, didn't play a whole 16 games. Adam Thielen, who well cracked 1,000 yards. So could you see that 1,200 from Adam Thielen go down to 1,000, and then those 200 go to Stefon Diggs? 100%. Yeah, I think these two guys can both crack 1,000 yards. That's why they're ranked so high, even though they're on the same team.
Well, and the big thing also is, I know we talked about the quarterback thing. You mentioned with one of the other wide receivers we talked about, I think it was the Patriots. What are you going to do with these targets that went to Amendola and Brandon Cooks? The thing also here is you had 68 targets alone go to Jerick McKinnon. I know that Dalvin Cook's coming back, but that could be targets too that I know Kyle Rudolph will probably get a couple of those.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest guy that's gaining from a guy like Kirk Cousins.
We're going to talk tight ends next week, but he's a guy that had over 80 targets last year from Keenum. So, I mean, this Viking team is going to be interesting fantasy-wise because I don't think whether you like Thielen more, you like Diggs more, I feel like with Cousins, it's basically going to be, I have one of them, and I hope they do well because he could literally throw it to anybody.
That's the thing is you might miss out on the better one. You might take Diggs. Thielen might be better. You might take Thielen. Diggs might be better, but both are going to be quality weapons. I have that feeling, and the only way I feel like they won't is if they get injured. So I think that's the biggest thing. And again, Diggs, I just feel that his athleticism is better. He's smaller than Thielen, but not by too much. I think it's an inch disparity, and I think maybe like 10 pounds. I think Diggs can still be massive on the outside. I think that he's a guy that can also work on the inside. I think Diggs is more of an all-around player. He's a better athlete, and I think Stefon Diggs, when healthy, is probably going to be a more consistent option for Case Keenum.
Another guy in this region that we have ranked at 12. He's another guy moving to a new team than what he was last year. Have the Rams found their answer for their main go-to target for Jared Goff and Brandon Cooks?
I mean, they had a pretty damn good weapons last year. Connor Kupp was pretty good for them. Sammy Watkins was pretty good for them.
But with Brandon Cooks, is this going to be another one, like I said, where it's like, Woods, Kupp, Cooks, they're all kind of evenly, or is it going to be Cooks is up here. He's the main fantasy go-getter. And then there's Kupp and Woods who are getting theirs.
Well, maybe it's just because I think I saw what Brandon Cooks did in this New England Patriots offense, and you even look at his numbers. You'd
Playing
be
with
like,
the GOAT.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his numbers. I mean, his yards per reception were up. He still had 7 touchdowns, which isn't too far off from what he's gotten before. 9 and 8 were his high. 7 not too far behind that. You look at his targets. Still had 114 targets. Dropped the ball more last year, but maybe he wasn't hooked up with Tom Brady as much as he was Drew Brees. Could he be an explosive player still? 100%. Kid's only 25 years old. He's going to be interested to see what happens, especially Jared Goff. I mean, these two kids, maybe their energy is going to vibe more, and they're going to be able to at least bond more in the locker room. But it's something where I'm just worried about Brandon Cooks' production because he didn't have great production last year. We saw that we expected him to have even bigger production. He was going to be the number one guy. Julian Edelman's out. Brandon Cooks is going to be the number one weapon. And he wasn't really that. That's why the Patriots moved on from him. He was good. He wasn't great. So I have my worries about Brandon Cooks, where, Amari Cooper, I have a guy I had ranked above him. Here he has that connection with Derek Carr. You look at Alshon Jeffrey. He has that connection with Carson Wentz. Jarvis Landry, I put higher, but that's because he's been the reception leader twice in his career. He's going to be getting balls thrown at him. Tyrod Taylor is going to need a safety blanket. Jarvis Landry also is pretty much the same amount of as athletic as Brandon Cooks is, so that's another reason why. And you look at guys like Adam Thielen, 1,200 yards receiving last year. He's getting a better weapon in Kirk Cousins, and Larry Fitzgerald's Larry Fitzgerald. I mean, that's going into my top 10 range. I just feel like Brandon Cooks, there's a lot of questions about him. Can he be great? 100%. I'm just a little bit worried about how he's going to bond with Goff. He might bond better than he did with Tom Brady, but it's still a question that I have.
One of the things I like most about this is...
he also got destroyed in the Super Bowl, and how is he going to bounce back from that? He's playing right now. He's at OTAs, but how is he going to bounce back from that?
The thing that I think most, because you had him in your top 20, both Mark and I had him at 10, Mark had him at 9, and the thing with me I wonder is, can Sean McVay get the most out of him? Because... I'm not throwing any flack at Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick is one of the all-time greatest head coaches in the NFL. Well, Josh McDaniels. But I mean, with Sean McVay, what he's been able to do with players, he's been able to get the most out of players that that entire Rams team was able to get the most out of them that we didn't even see. And of course, I know he's different than Jeff Fisher was. I wonder if he'll be able to get the most out of Cooks.
They ran so many plays for Brandon Cooks, though. It's not like he got again, back in New Orleans this last year, 117 targets, 114 targets in New England. They still ran a ton of jet sweeps for him. They still tried to work his speed into the offense. It just seemed like there wasn't a connection consistently out there between him and Tom Brady. I think that was the biggest thing. Will it be Sean McVay? I don't really know. Maybe working with a young head coach in Sean McVay will spark his interest, especially
or even
having
a younger quarterback like you mentioned.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Having a young quarterback like Goff, maybe he'll be able to bond more than he did Tom Brady. I think the biggest question is just how he will be able to do in that Rams locker room. He was still competing for a championship last year, made it to the Super Bowl. It still felt like he wasn't consistently on his game. It didn't feel like he lived up to the expectations we had for him before. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Brandon Cooks. I'm not really sure what to expect. That's why I had him a little bit lower than you guys. I would rather be more conservative about him from what I saw last year than, say, hey, he's already going to be a top 10 wide receiver, because I think there's guys below him or even above him that already have that connection established with their quarterbacks, and it's not going to take them time to adjust into their system. So I think Cooks, it might take a while. He might click right away, and I might look like an idiot, but I'll look like an idiot rather than putting him in the top 10 and him being outside of it. I have worries about Brandon Cooks, not because of his talent, just because of the way he's going to bond with his teammates. So I worry also about how he's going to be able to at least dominate, receptions. Will he be able to get touchdown receptions consistently? Will he be back near that 9 and 8 level, or will he possibly fall off to that 5 or 6 level? Sammy Watkins had 8 touchdowns last year, but didn't have a ton of yardage. Will he fill that role as well? It's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Any final person in this 11 through 20 you want to hit before we crack the top 10?
I think Tyreek Hill's going to be interesting. It's a guy that is definitely a gamble just because you have a new quarterback there in Pat Mahomes. But he's worked with Pat Mahomes before. Pat Mahomes was there last year. And he's, again, still the number one guy. You still have Kelsey. You add Sammy Watkins. There's more help for Tyreek Hill. He's going to be an interesting guy. And also Doug Baldwin. He's a guy that's been so consistent throughout his career. But, you're losing Paul Richardson, you're losing Jimmy Graham, you're going to be having more of a focus on you. That offensive line is still terrible. They drafted Rashad Penny, but will that be enough to spark the rushing game, to take more pressure off Russell Wilson? He's going to be the number one guy Russell goes to, but if Russell goes down, you're screwed. If Doug Baldwin goes down, you're screwed.
Plus, with that Seattle team, it seems like their team is doing a little bit of this, and you've got the Rams and the 49ers doing a little bit of that.
Yeah, and even the Cardinals, too. I mean, the Cardinals have a spectacular defense. You think Rosen or Sam Bradford possibly could even put them back up there.
We're projecting an uptrend for them.
It's an uptrend.
An
it's not
uptrend.
a thing. But I think that, again, Doug Baldwin.
Uptrend.
Doug Baldwin, it might be a guy that is still probably there later than you would expect him to because people have those worries. But if he's a guy that, you have Demaryius Thomas out there and Doug Baldwin's still on the board, go with Doug Baldwin because Doug Baldwin's been more consistent than Demaryius Thomas has been, and he still has that connection with Russell Wilson.
And the one that I'll mention is with Tyreek Hill. If Alex Smith and Nagy were still there, he would have easily been in my top 10. To me, my worries are not with Tyreek Hill. It's more of how is this offense, although it's going to fundamentally be the same, how is it going to be different with Nagy out of town, not calling the plays? And number 2, I am higher on Patrick Mahomes than some. That's why I had Tyreek right at 11, right hugging my top 10. But what's it going to be without Alex Smith out there and with Patrick Mahomes?
More of, I don't think Pat Mahomes isn't, capable of being an NFL quarterback.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
It's just I think he's young. It's going to take, he's young. It's going to take him time to adjust. And also, if he finds a safety blanket early, like a Travis Kelce, that might take targets away from Tyreek Hill. And also, you still have Sammy Watkins. Sammy Watkins was the 4th pick in that draft when he was drafted. I mean, he's a guy that can still be dangerous on the outside. So if Pat Mahomes wants to go deep, he might like Sammy Watkins over. Also, Investopedia does have uptrend as a word.
Do they?
It's a stock term. An uptrend describes the price movement of a financial asset.
Cool. I didn't even know that, and I used it. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below about our 11 through 20 and who we might have missed.